Check 1 2. Check 1 2 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Wonderful. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour à tous et tous. As many of you know, earlier this month we celebrated the 25th annual TransSecure Awards. During the event, we heard 13 remarkable stories about brave and quick-thinking OC Transpo staff members who spotted danger and responded without hesitation. Today, I'm pleased to share another story about how OC Transpo TransSecure program is continuing to impact our city. On a cool April morning, operator Eli was at the end of his trip on Laurier Street in Gatineau when he smelled something strange. He proceeded to pull over to the side of the road and look for the cause of the smell. After looking throughout the bus, he could not determine what the smell was or where it was coming from. As Eli was about to contact the Transit Operations Control Center, a passing motorist pulled over and advised him that he saw flames coming from the back of the bus. Without hesitation, Eli grabbed the onboard fire extinguisher, headed outside, and began spraying the flames. As soon as the fire was out, he contacted the Transit Operations Control Center and requested emergency services to his location. Once Gatineau Fire arrived, they were able to take control of the situation and ensure the safety and security of the operator, the vehicle, and the nearby area. Very grateful that Eli is here with us today, and I would like to invite him to join me here at the front. As Chair of the Transit Commission, I want to congratulate Eli for carrying out duty of providing safe, secure, and reliable transit service to the Ottawa community, and it's because of people like you that OC Transpo is the safe and efficient transit system that it is. So thank you very much. So we'll call to order the meeting of the Transit Commission for the 20th of May, 2015. Announcements, we did employee recognition. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. Confirmation of the minutes, April 22. Carried. Thank you. Communications, we have responses to inquiries. Anything? Perfect. Item number 1 will be held for a presentation and a public delegation. Item number 2 is being held for a public delegation. Item number 3, extension of temporary reduction of paratranspo cash fares. Any questions? Is that item carried? Carried, thank you. And item 4, review of OC Transpo advertising standards. Have we received that? Item is received. Thank you very much. Item number 1, annual performance report. I'll pass this over to Mr. Manconi and his team.
Good morning, members of Commission. Mr. Scrimgeour is going to walk you through a presentation that covers the report, and we'll gladly answer any of your questions.
Thanks, John. This is the annual performance report for 2014, so it covers the calendar year 2014, does not include things that have happened since then, and this follows a standard format that we've been using for about 6 or 7 years. This presentation will show you some of the main highlights. There's further details of many of these things in the report. We've prepared an annual performance report similar to this since 2007, and it's a snapshot of what happened on the system, how the transit services were planned, operated, and managed over the past year. In 2014, we carried 97.1 million customer trips, and that is very close to as high as the year before, but there's been slight declines since the peak we were at in 2011. Ridership customers pay their fares in different ways. 39% of our customers use a regular monthly pass, 8% use an express monthly pass, 28% pay their fare single fare using cash, ticket, e-purse, or a day pass, and 25% use a discounted pass, such as a senior's pass, a community pass, or a U-pass. On paratransport, we carried 787,000 customer trips in 2014, and that's the highest level ever. We had 18.4 million requests for transit information, whether that was through the travel planner on the website, visiting the website, or calling 560-1000 for recorded information. Now, it's interesting to see that that is down considerably from the 23.9 million requests we had in 2013. Part of the reason for that is that the number of requests for real-time information is now up to 174 million in the year. Some of those are the 560 SMS text requests through the OC Transpo My Transit iPhone app or through other third-party Google, BlackBerry, and iPhone apps. And that's up considerably from the 94 million requests in 2013. There we go. Sorry. Thank you. Too much feedback. Couldn't hear my own voice. 99.6% of the amount of service that we planned to run did run on weekdays last year. 99.8% of the planned service on weekends did run. And those are both very high levels. And as you can see, they sustain the high levels that we've been at in recent years. 67% of regular service operated on time, and the on-time definition that we use, as approved by the Commission several years ago, is not early and no more than 5 minutes late. That's slightly up from the 65% last year. 59% of regular service in the afternoon when traffic conditions are often more challenging, and that's the same as last year. On express service, 81% on time, almost as high as the 83% that we saw last year. 68% of express service in the afternoon, very similar to the 69% we saw in 2013. And this table shows the percentages over recent years. And you can see that the levels we're at are very similar to the levels we've been at in recent years, except that express service in the morning was higher about 3 years ago. It's very important to note that 80% of our operation happens on the road network, where we are not in control of those circumstances, and where traffic and weather can definitely have an effect on transit operations. 95% of paratransport customers were picked up on time, and that's the same as we saw a year earlier. 96% of elevators and escalators were in service at any given day, and that's an increase from the 92% we saw last year, perhaps the result of some intensive life cycle maintenance that's been going into older elevators and escalators. We saw a crime rate of 0.91 criminal offenses per 100,000 customer trips. It's a theoretical calculation. It's a calculation that doesn't mean anything in and of itself, but you compare it year to year, and you can see it's slightly down from 2013, and also quite consistent with where we were in 2010 and 2011, but lower than we saw in 2012, which that year was attributed not necessarily to more crime, but to a higher number of special constables who were responding to reports and recording them. Fare compliance by our customers, 96%, with about 4% of our customers who were either given verbal warnings, written warnings, or provincial offense notices. And this number is slightly higher than it had been the previous year, largely because more and more people were moving over to Presto, and as people hadn't got the Presto card working quite properly, we were helping them to do so rather than acting in a punitive way. Across the system, operating costs were covered 53% by customers' fares, and the remaining 47% either by property taxes or by provincial gas tax transfers. And this isn't really a performance measure, but more of a a measure of how council has chosen to fund any transit system year to year. And it's the same level that we were at in 2013. You can see it's also higher than it had been before the service changes that were made in 2011. So as I said, these measures are following a format and some standards that were laid out between 2007 and 2009. And we found that over the years there's been interest in other forms of measurement. We've also found that some of the measures that we adopted when we were setting up the system no longer quite align with the best practices in the transit industry, and some of them don't quite measure things that we're in control of and can react to, or things that are important to our customers. So we're having a thorough look at our performance measures, as it says here, based on experience with the current measures, based on benchmarking with other transit systems across the world, to focus on the service quality that customers perceive it. And so we'll be coming back to the Commission later this year with recommendations on a new structure of performance measurement that we can use going into 2016. So I'll turn it back to John for any final comments, or to the Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scrimgeour. Before we take questions from the Commission, we do have one public delegation. Kevin O'Donnell, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try to be as quick as I can. My delegation today is largely on what I think is missing from this report. It's in three parts. First, the on-time performance report. You're looking through quarterly and annual reports for the last couple of years. I've noticed that there is the AM and the PM peak report for on-time performance for regular and express service. And I think what's missing is similar statistics for the midday, the evening, and the weekend, or even if it was just summarized down to non-peak report. For example, I'm going to use my bike to get back to work after I come here. I'm sure you'd appreciate that some citizens might want to come to this meeting by bus and then get to wherever they need to go to afterwards, perhaps at around noon, or sometimes longer meetings at 1 p.m. So I think they'd be interested in how does OC Transit serve them in those times, or during the weekend. I used the bus with Rack and Roll to bring my daughter to my parents. It was great service. I stayed on the Transitway, which I knew would be reliable, but I don't know service levels on the bus that goes down Pleasant Park, for instance. So I think there'd be value in this Commission and Council looking at that data and asking for it to be formalized in the annual report. Also, there's beyond just customer expectation setting, there's just a revenue potential there. Rightly or wrongly, some customers might think that they maybe won't take the bus because they just don't know how it will be, especially outside of your regular bus usage. I know my buses. I know exactly how they perform just by lived experience, and I know they're reliable and I have no complaints. But to step off my comfort path and take a bus to a new destination for the first time, I think I'd benefit from knowing that that service is going to be according to schedule, give or take. So, how much reduction in property tax burden can we go to if OC can have more revenue because there's customers who are now more comfortable using it on the off-peak hours. Maybe a lot of bus driver users are using it to get to work and they're quite comfortable with it, but then they just go back to their car on the off-peak because they just don't know. Or they had one bad experience, which could be weather-related or just traffic snarl somewhere kilometers away, and then that's their lived experience, and they just assume it's always the way it is, which would be an injustice to how well OC Transport really does perform. Secondly, the route level statistics, similarly for AM and PM peak, I just learned, I didn't know until I was preparing for this meeting, that OC Transport does publish route level statistics on the website. There might be benefit to asking, as part of the recommendations for this review, for the report, to have those brought into the annual report themselves. Some of you might be aware, I kind of do look at the agendas from time to time, and I didn't know that data existed. So I bet a lot of other people don't know it exists either. Similarly, that data is currently only cut out at the route level by AM peak service. So if it's possible to have those also reflected by PM peak, AM peak, and then off-peak hours. That would give people the ability to look, I'm going to take this new bus for the first time outside of regular hours, and look, it does perform well. It also gives this commission and council the opportunity to really look into the data and say, while recognizing that the on-time performance network-wide is very good or consistent and improving, why did this happen? There didn't seem to be a construction job over on this road. Why is this road off? And just give that ability for you to govern and ask for better from staff, which is the mandate. Lastly, I hope I still have time. I'll just be very quick. I did an info out of curiosity for the raw GPS logs that come off of the buses every few minutes. It was fascinating to look at. I just requested 5 minutes because I didn't want to spend a lot of money. That was 14,000 data points, which is just such a rich data set. So I was going to offer the suggestion that somewhere between 14,000 data points every 5 minutes, which is, even for me, found it challenging to deal with. That's millions of data points a day over a year. That's an incredible amount of data. Somewhere between that high level of granularity and what's currently being produced, which is one chart saying how we did over the AM peak for the entire year, which now encompasses hundreds of millions of data points. If there's an opportunity for, as staff are already whittling down that data, if there's an intermediary point where before it gets summarized to the chart level, that data could be either at the annual time or just daily. I don't quite know what the best setting there is, that data start to be uploaded to the city's existing open data portal, so that citizen advocates like myself and lots of other people in the IT industry in Ottawa can just start to dig in and see what's there and help that even augment other projects like knowing where congestion is, because OC Transpo has deployed a huge sensor fleet for its own purposes, and maybe that information could also be leveraged in other avenues. So that's my comments, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. O'Donnell, for your presentation. I'm sure that our staff have, I know they got your email, and I'm sure they'll take into consideration the points you raised during the review. Do any members of the Commission have questions for Mr. O'Donnell? No? Well, thank you very much for your presentation this morning. On the presentation, I have Councillor Eglai, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So going to the on-time performance statistics, one thing I didn't see up there is can you break it down, or do you break it down in terms of, are they coming early, or are they coming late, or are they not coming at all? Because I think anybody who's a transit user would probably say the ones that come too early are the biggest problem, because you then miss the bus and you miss your connections and what have you. So do we have a breakdown of in those three categories?
Yes, Mr. Chair, if you go to the report and look at page 17, figure 14 and figure 15 on page 17, figure 16 and figure 17 on page 18, those numbers are shown there, and you can see that there's a very, very small, but there are some buses that have run early. Most buses, as you saw, are on time, and a very small number are late as well. They're broken down in these four tables.
And so that sort of sets the stage, but my bigger question is, can you outline what steps are taken if there's a consistent issue on a particular run or a particular route? In other words, the 8:15-174 is consistently showing up at 8:23 or 8:13 or whatever. And so what's the protocol in place? Because we know that this is an ongoing issue, and I get that much of it is traffic related, and we only have so much control over, especially at construction time, over traffic. But I'd like to know, and I think residents would like to know, that there's a protocol or a process that kicks in if there's a consistent issue on a particular run or a particular route. So could somebody talk about that a little bit?
Yes, certainly. It's a great question. We used to just look at the data. Now Mr. Charter and the great work that he's done with his team have implemented some additional measures. We do everything from ride-alongs, which some of you are aware of. We've actually gone out where there's a repetitive problem that doesn't jump out at us from our GPS data that says there's an issue, or we can't do a direct correlation to a construction thing. So Mr. Charter will put a supervisor out there and actually meet customers and do a ride-along. There's the immediate controls that when we toured the control center, those screens that you saw there with the controllers, if they see, you remember the green, yellow, red zone, if they're entering into the yellow zone, that means they have the potential to run early. They will radio that bus and tell them to pull over and wait, which that in itself generates comments. We've all had them. Hey, why is my bus pulled over and flashers are on and waiting? That's because they're trying to adhere to the schedule. There's the hotspots list that you saw, that manual, overly simplified process, but there's in the control center, there was the whiteboard with, here are some bus routes that we need to monitor. That's enhanced monitoring in the control room. So it's a wide range of things that we do, and the goal is to try to find out where the issue is to close those gaps.
Now, I know that we adjust schedules at certain times of the year, and that's sort of fixed. But if we do have a consistent problem, is there any flexibility to adjust a schedule around that problem outside of those fixed times a year?
Yes, Mr. Scrimger and Mr. Charter, from the planning perspective and the operational perspective, do their best to make minor adjustments if they can. And as you've seen in some of our responses, if we can't, what we commit to the customers is that in the next quarterly schedule change, we will try our best to accommodate adjustments.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aguilar. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you very much. A few different question areas this morning. First off, with respect to the use of smartphones and mobile devices to get an understanding of whether the bus is on time or late or when it's going to arrive, some really interesting API numbers up there, number of SMS calls, but do we know how many people are actually using their mobile device? With SMS, for instance, I imagine you must have an understanding of how many unique phone numbers we've been sending those messages to. We can capture device-level data. How many people actually use a mobile device to get their bus schedule information?
I was just looking over to Mr. Delage and Mr. Scrimger. We don't know that. We can't extract that. We just know from an industry perspective we're leading the pack in terms of those very impressive numbers that you saw there.
They're big numbers. I noted in the response to Commissioner Wilkinson's inquiry this morning with respect to arrival times, for instance, that we cited the availability of mobile device information as one of the reasons that we may not need to move as quickly or move in that direction as we could. I wonder if we're relying too much on mobile devices and not trying to improve our on-time arrival instead.
No, I can assure you that's not the case. Okay. Our operators, our supervisors, our superintendents, the whole team of staff members have one mission, and that's to provide safe, reliable, consistent service. And again, back to the tour when we looked at the control center, that multi-million-dollar investment in that control center is to achieve that outcome. That's what everybody's focused on. And the technology is a tool in the toolbox for the customer experience.
Okay. Is that something that might be able to be added to the customer surveys that you do? Do you use an app, for instance?
Mr. Chair, we have asked that question in the past, and we'll be considering what the right way of gathering that information is in the future performance reporting and surveying.
Okay, thank you. With respect to the on-time arrival performance, do we have any notion of whether there's a difference between what I'll call the feeder routes, like the 135, for instance, versus some of the cross-town routes? Because the perception of the people I speak with is that, the service is excellent in Orleans, where you have the routes that serve one of the major hubs, but, the 14 or the 85 or the number 2 are more consistently late.
Yes, as Mr. O'Donnell noted in his delegation, we do provide route-by-route information, a summary of it on octransport.com, but all the data are used all the time in monitoring the service and in scheduling the service and providing information about the service to customers. So we're using much more of the information than we see in this one presentation. Yeah. Routes that are in areas of high traffic variability, generally have lower on-time performance than routes that are either on more uncongested roads or on roads where the traffic conditions are more stable through the week, or on the transitway, of course, where the reliability is highest.
I'd be interested in seeing some of those numbers at the roll-up as you're looking at different metrics to report. One of the interesting stats was with respect to elevator and escalator availability. It's obviously very good, but there's always room for improvement. Is that expected to be improved with the Confederation line?
The Confederation line, we were very insistent on ensuring redundancy for elevators. So just about every station has some redundancy built into it. And then there's obviously some very stiff performance measures for RTM, who is the maintainer of those systems, to make sure those elevators are operating.
Fantastic. So it does sound like we can expect an improvement over some already impressive numbers. My final question was with respect to the, I think it was the maintenance numbers, or the number of unscheduled maintenance-related pulling buses out of service. It noted that the average age of the buses are 5.5 years right now. Is that going to climb as the years go by? Will it peak or plateau at a particular level? I'm just wondering what our acquisition strategy is to try to keep that bus age, at that very low level.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. That bus age is the envy of North America, by the way. OC Transport used to have a much older average age fleet. There has been multi-million-dollar investments in the bus fleet with the articulated bus acquisition, with the double-decker. And what we've done is we've mapped out every bus lasts 15 years. You've approved in your capital budget a midlife rebuild. So every 7.5 year, Mr. Charter's team rebuilds the buses so they're almost brand new and extends their life. And then we've mapped out everything that we need to do vis-a-vis the Confederation line, and so that we can keep that average fleet fluid and keeping it very, very conservative the way it is right now. So it's been mapped out in the long-range financial plan.
So do we expect to see that average age of bus fairly consistently for the next 10 or 15 years?
Hopefully, obviously, as time progresses, but the key point that you've done is you've invested in that midlife rehab, so even if you don't keep that average age, your buses will be better.
Yeah.
Because you're doing the midlife rehab, which is best practices.
Good news. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, thank you, Councillor Leeper. Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to OC Transpo staff for the report, which I thought gave a really interesting glimpse into different parts of the operation. I just had a number of questions that arose from reading the report. I'm on page 15 to begin with. And looking at the urban park and ride spaces, I see efforts have been made to increase the number of spots available. But I guess assuming this is sort of an average daily rate, it looks like there are a significant number of spots that aren't used. I mean, I guess roughly 30% or something. And I'm just wondering, are there any easy ways to try and incentivize people to use those spots? They're available. We obviously want people to use them. What sort of steps do you think are out there in terms of trying to fill those spaces, or is there no magic bullet here?
Mr. Chair, I think I'd agree that there's no magic bullet. I think the goal that the city has when deciding through the Transportation Master Plan every 5 years on where to build park and ride lots is to choose those locations where they will be of highest value to residents. And but that means you're looking ahead 5 to 10 years to try to know where the traffic demand will be, what the rate of development will be, how the investment should be spread around. There's clearly some lots that have become immensely popular very shortly after having been built. Fallowfield Station, for instance, which started out with people wondering whether to build 70 spaces or 170 spaces, and now has approximately 1,600. Other lots which have been built a little further in advance of demand which have space available. There's some ability for customers to get some priority at the busy lots if they want to reserve a space. So it really is depending on what customers need. It's also, I find it interesting to remember that park and ride lots are not the biggest part, nowhere near the biggest part of the OC Transpo service. They're used by between 2 and 3% of our customers. So much, much more of our attention is always on providing the transit service that everyone uses, and not necessarily just the service or the parking lot at the location that tiny fraction of customers use.
Thanks. Just over on the other page, page 14, just looking at the breakdown of the way that people are paying for their fares. I know the Eco-Pass was phased out. This is my own ignorance, so excuse me for not knowing the answer to this, but is there presently a discount if a rider purchases their Presto card in a 12-month increment? And if not, is that something that you're thinking about? Are there benefits to giving a slight discount for that in order to encourage people to continue to use their card?
Mr. Chair, no, there's not currently a discount for bulk purchase of monthly passes. There used to be 2. There was an annual pass, and there was also the Eco-Pass. And there was a decision taken by Council in 2012 that one of the ways to increase the financial performance of transit, to increase the share of the total cost of the transit service that's paid by customers, was to reduce the number of discounts upon discounts, where people could get one discount by virtue of their situation and then another discount by how they chose to pay their fare. Because we need to respect the affordability, the long-term affordability plan the Council's laid out, the fare revenue has to come in somehow, and if we're going to give a discount to one group of customers, we will have to recoup that money from another group of customers. And you may recall when we had the budget presentation, the chart we had on the screen that showed that for an average fare of about $1.80, some people are paying over $4, and some people are paying under $1. And we can't move more people to the bottom of that chart. We have to keep the average fare constant. So for every discount you give to one person, you do have to recoup the cost from somebody else. And where we are now is where Council chose to be in 2012. Now, there are some changes we have to make to the fare, just the way the fare system works, to connect with the way the light rail line will work, both lines, Trillium and Confederation lines. And so we're working on that with the view to coming back at an appropriate time with some recommendations.
Yeah, what I was imagining is a situation where a customer maybe doesn't buy Presto Pass for July and August because they think they'll be on vacation for part of that or something, but would otherwise maybe buy an annual pass that exceeds the revenue you would get from 10 passes, but they buy it because they think they might use it occasionally. But I'm sure there are industry statistics on that type of thing.
We saw that happen more before the Presto fare card came in than since. One of the things that the Presto system allows you to do is buy the monthly passes during the months that you need monthly passes, and on those months when you're going to be on vacation, you can flip over to pay per ride and do it all from your computer at home. Back before Presto started, we would see more people who would just buy the monthly pass because it was just easier, even if they weren't making so many trips. And a couple of years ago when that started to happen, we did see that in our fare revenue. It was a small impact as people were giving us slightly less money in total for the trips they were making.
Thank you. Just with regard, I'm on page 17 to the information about performance on regular and express routes, and I guess building on Mr. O'Donnell's presentation, it did strike me that in some ways this is unfair to OC Transpo because a lot of the early and late would be due to congestion, certainly on the non-transit way routes. Would it be relatively straightforward, given that we're not doing quarterly reports but just annual ones, to include some snapshot of an off-peak period for the next report?
Mr. Chair, we're looking at all of those questions as we develop our recommendations for how we should measure and report on our performance in future. There's a number of things about the way we've been measuring on-time performance that could stand to be improved. For instance, we're not weighting our statistics on the basis of what customers are experiencing. We're showing what the buses are doing. So we're showing a bus as, you talk about underselling the service that we're providing. We're showing a bus as early, even if it's just running along the transitway and happens to be early at a moment when no customers are getting on nor off. We report on some of the bus times, even if customers are getting off, they're not getting on the bus. So we want to have a much closer look at how all across the world transit agencies are reporting on the issue, which is more than just on time. It's how can customers expect what will happen to them? How much longer than they expect might they be waiting for the bus? So there's a lot of interesting methods in the world now, and we're looking at all of those.
My last question is with regard to an area of the report that wasn't there, but I think had been in previous years, which is information on fuel and emissions. And I thought that was interesting in previous years because I think there's a very strong environmental case to be made for OC Transpo and using OC Transpo. And I'm just wondering if that information is something that you plan to reinsert into future reports.
Mr. Chair, yes, we do plan. We look at it. It's important. I think it was last year, it might have been the year before, we reported that the measure we were using in this report was no longer appropriate. A lot of the calculations were being made per bus and per bus kilometer rather than per customer and customer kilometer, and they were having the perverse result of showing that we were doing worse as we ran our system more and more efficiently by carrying people on larger capacity buses. So what we noted at the time is that we'd be looking at a new way of reporting on consumption, fuel consumption, emissions, and cost for the revised performance reporting measures that will be coming back to you later this year.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nussbaum. Councillor Tierney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very encouraged by a lot of what I see in this report. And one thing that really stood out to me was related to slide 17 and related specifically to the crime. And I note that there's an asterisk where we added on some more special constables. There's probably a correlation there, obviously, on why the crime rates are falling, we would hope. That being said, we also made a change in the policy a couple of years ago, too, where we said we were going to get special constables out of their cars and walking the platforms. Do you think a part of that may have contributed to the falling numbers? Because I definitely notice a presence of those constables now, which seems to be hopefully lending itself to these lower rates.
We don't have the evidence to make that direct correlation. We just we know the stories. We've heard the feedback from our customers and from our operators that there is more visibility out there. We see it in the reports that we're responding quicker in difficult situations around Mac Bridge, for example. I know 2 weeks ago there was an arrest made there with a very serious incident and so forth. So don't have the direct correlation, but I think it's a combination of things, more visibility out there with staff doing the walk and rides and the bike and rides, and also we're talking about it more often, and some of the campaigns that we're doing on the buses and future initiatives that we have come forward I think are helping.
That's great. It seems like a good investment, and you're seeing the returns from my perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Kakish.
Thank you, Chair. Just had a quick question on slide number 11 in the presentation about the operating time, and I know some of my colleagues have touched on this already, but it's certainly one of the main issues I hear from my residents on the 99, and we've been working with staff on this offline, but I see the numbers from 2013 and 2014 haven't changed, so whatever we're doing, what measures we're doing right now in terms of sending the supervisors to check on when that bus starts and when it stops and where the the disconnects are, or where the delays are happening, is not working. So what other measures can be done to improve the reliability, especially during that afternoon peak service?
There's the quarterly change that Mr. Scrimger looks at, and I know that bit by bit we're addressing some of these. Certainly with the Confederation line, you'll have the whole core in terms of the spine of the system, stage 1 piece. You'll see numbers increase significantly. And then there's active monitoring and discussion about it. We can't fix things that we don't know, so the discussions that we're having with your office, examples like that help out. I do want to say that this 0 to 5 that was picked years ago is a difficult performance measure to achieve. We should be worried if all of these were 100. That means the targets are too easy. There's a lot of great literature out there in terms of scorecards and performance measures, and I've been around this stuff for a long time. If we were doing hundreds across the board, I think we would have picked easy targets, 0 to 5. And, I got my eyes opened a couple of years ago when I started to dive into these numbers. Mr. Scrimger showed me what other jurisdictions are doing. And some of them, wow, I said, look at them, they're at 80, they're 90. Well, when you dive into the data and what they're measuring, it's a very different performance measure. So we will continue to say we have some challenges out there in some of the routes, and we're open to suggestions if there's things that we're missing or not understanding. That's why the ride-alongs, the discussions with the counselor's office, with the customer groups are helpful for us, because data only tells you certain things. You need to go out and experience it. Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that, and I guess we did adopt that high standard, and the takeaway for staff here, I guess, is what I'm saying is that 59 is still 59. So if the measures we're using right now are not working, maybe we need to take a look at what we can do outside of that to improve the reliability in the afternoon. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just to build on that before we go to the next speaker, do we review the route to ensure that our estimation on how long it should take and when it should be at each stop is accurate, so that we think it's going to be an hour, after we run it for a year, it's actually like an hour and 15 or an hour and 20, so we actually need to adjust the schedule to reflect reality?
Yes, Mr. Chair, we do have processes. We actually have multiple processes in place to make sure that we do verify the estimated running times, both from an end-to-end perspective, but as well as within the various segments of a route.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Councillor Cloutier.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to build on what Councillor Leeper said. On page 21 of the report, first of all, how many kilometers does the average bus run in a year? Does anyone?
We do 64 million kilometers for the whole fleet.
On 700, 900 buses? Or?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, on a Monday to Friday, we have just under 800 buses out in service, approximately half that on weekends.
Okay. On page 21 of the report, am I correct in reading a rate of 24.8 mechanical failures per 100,000 vehicle kilometers? So if a bus runs 100,000 kilometers, are we to expect that there will be 24 mechanical failures on that bus?
That, Mr. Chair, that is what the figure is. If you were to run that distance, that's how many would have occurred during that 1 year. And as we point out here, it's continued to come down in recent years, and that's the lowest we've had it.
On a relatively young fleet, as Mr. Banconi was saying, how does that, while the figures come down, how does that compare with other jurisdictions, or is such a comparison appropriate, or given diesel, or?
I think two things. Mechanical failure that pulls it out of service can be a minor thing. So if it's got a wiper that's not working,
okay,
so forth. So it seems like a lot, but it's safety is the first thing, and it trumps everything, right? The operator has the ability to say this vehicle has an issue and I can't carry on. Don't know how we compare to other jurisdictions. I do know that our maintenance regimes, as you've seen in some other presentations we've given you, are very, very high, and MTO audits, we've been, knock on wood, MTO has been very impressed with our inspection level and our insistence that no defect is considered minor. We treat them all very, very significantly and quickly.
Okay. Thank you for that. Follow up on Councillor Nussbaum. On page 15 of the report, the increased capacity of the park and ride, the 7,400 total spaces available, how many park and ride locations is that?
I'm sorry, I'm going from memory. It's 12 or 15.
12 to 15. And so we see an increase we're increasing the availability of park and rides, or are we increasing the available space in existing park and rides?
There are both. In recent years, it's been the opening of new park and ride lots. In some cases, the capital budget that you've approved and the Transportation Committee has been approved has been for the expansion of existing park and ride lots. So, as an example, we, several years ago, expanded Trim and expanded Fallowfield. At other times in the past, we've opened new lots like Riverview, like Nepean Woods, and we've got investment in all of this coming up as part of the capital budget to both expand and build new lots. So wherever the increase has been in recent years has been by new construction, either at existing lots or new lots. Some years ago, backdating the numbers that are shown in this report, there was also a very careful engineered solution to reconfigure, repaint existing lots to use the asphalt that we had as intensively as possible, to have as little wasted space from the way the lanes were configured, the way the lines were painted, and but that's gone as far as it can.
Thank you. Paratransport, page 13 of the report. We note the increased number of paratransport users carried to 787,000. Most of the increase is by taxi or services other than our paratransport buses. Do you have data on the relative cost of each, providing each service, or is it more expensive to provide a taxi type service for the paratransport or our buses? Or
Mr. Chair, the average cost per trip on taxi is about $10 less than when operated through our minibuses. So it's, I think it's about $45 per trip on our minibuses and around $35 per trip on a taxi.
So is that a strategic initiative on part of for the service to go more towards that service for cost containment?
Yes, Para has gone through a long history of insourcing, outsourcing, what's cheaper, better, faster, all those things. And the service was brought in-house 2 years ago in terms of the mini fleet. And with a conscious decision that we will not expand that fleet, we will manage growth with a third-party provider for the taxi piece. So we're holding our fleet size and our staff complement where it is, and we believe that's an appropriate balance to keep the competitive costing and service element alive, because I always get troubled when people start doing the unit costs on Para, because we've had a lot of history on service versus cost and so forth, and as the private sector pointed out numerous times, they weren't even bidding because they all thought they could make money on this service. It's a very difficult and demanding service to provide, and while cost is important, quality and care of those very delicate customers is paramount for us. So it's a balance in the business model.
And I absolutely agree with you, Mr. Manconi, that service is for the more vulnerable population, absolutely of primary concern, and thank you for that service. My last question, page 24, fair non-compliance, 4.1% seems to be an extraordinarily high number. Are we to say that on any given day we're losing 4.1% of revenue?
Thank you. I'd like to speak to this one because I know there's been a lot of questions on this. The first thing I'm going to tell you is careful of any transit agency that says they know what their fare compliance number is. This is based on, as you've heard, some of the inquiries that Mr. Charter handled. This is on our blitzes and our when we do controlled stops and so forth. The calculations, the whatever you want to call it, the functions, the algebra, the mathematics needed to figure out what your compliance rate is very complicated, and I've yet to see anyone do it well to the point that they can sit in front of a board or a commission and say, I guarantee you that our fare compliance is X or Y. And I tell you that because there's a lot of salespeople out there that want you to buy automated fare boxes and all kinds of measures and investments, and they say your fare compliance will go up. So what I tell them all, show me the evidence and give me a guarantee and I'll buy those very expensive fare boxes. We have some of those, by the way. We also have what all the operators and the customers like is the mechanical ones where you just drop your stuff in and nothing gets jammed and so forth. So this is based on the blitzes that we do, and you know, and what you know, some of the stories around this is people say, well, I see a bunch of people getting in the rear gates and they're not paying, and I say, well, yeah, they're probably a UPass student holder, and by the way, we are going to fix that. They're going to have a Presto-like card and so forth. So this is the best estimate based on the blitzes that Mr. Charter and Mr. Babe have done in terms of that. And no, we can't sit here and tell you this is how much money we're losing and guarantee it. This is the estimate based on some of the data and the information and the processes that we've done.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And just to build on that, because the provincial offenses are down 0.4%, Mr. Charter, can you explain why someone might get a verbal or a written warning?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Our fare enforcement unit looks at, we've been focusing a lot on the public education piece and working with our customers. As was noted by Mr. Scrimger earlier, in 2014 we're still looking at we're still doing the transition into the Presto Smart Card, and what we saw happening was a lot of customers weren't aware of the requirements to tap their pass. We also do see frequently a lot of issues where customers, the earlier on in the month, they haven't had the opportunity to go purchase a pass yet. So in those situations, we'd be issuing a written warning to ensure that they get that pass rather than issuing a ticket. There's other situations where our special constables frequently deal with is a customer's misplaced their proof of payment voucher that they've received. So the fare enforcement officers are utilizing their discretion in those situations, and they document if someone has been warned previously in the past. Our goal is not to ticket our customers. Our goal is to improve. Is to ensure that we are collecting the fares from our paying customers, but we don't want to be overly punitive at the same time. So they track whether or not someone's been warned in the past, and they look at those situations, and they use their judgment as to whether or not it should be a written warning or a ticket.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Councillor Egley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few other questions. And I want to ask some questions about our special events numbers, and more importantly, what we're doing going forward. I'm seeing, for example, for Winterwood, we have sponsorship. For New Year's Eve, we have sponsorship. And I guess where I'm coming from is with 2017 coming on, we're going to have, according to Mr. Councillor Cloutier, events all over the city. And I hope he's right. are we doing anything? We're working in conjunction with the 2017 committee to have those discussions about how we might build sponsorship, not only to showcase the system for our residents, but also to make a more pleasant experience for people coming to town for those events, so they don't have to get lost in traffic or what have you. So what are we doing in that regard to bring in sponsorship for the events in and around 2017?
Mr. Chair, we're doing a couple things. We met very early with the organizing committee, and we signaled to them that we want to be the transporter of choice for 2017, and we pointed to the TD Lansdowne model as the model to follow, that within any ticketed venue that you have, and I know there's going to be a lot of events, build that into the ticket price, and we will be there transporting people for that. And I know the reaction was very positive to that, and we're working hand in hand with the organizers to do that. So we have a sense of the scope and the scale of the events. With respect to advertising, branding, and so forth, we've given some space on our vehicles and so forth to do that. And I just use the word sponsorship carefully, because I know people think there's a lot of sponsorship out there for events, but as you saw on Canada Day, we were not successful in getting full sponsorship for the day. So what we did is we took money out of our marketing budget. Instead of spending money on a marketing campaign, we said, let's put that towards the revenue for that day, and we've heard nothing but positive on Canada Day. Now we provide free service the entire day, and we get lots of compliments from people. So we're getting innovative in that respect, but 2017 is on our radar screen. We are excited about it, and we want to be everywhere. The other piece we're doing is we have some very innovative discussions about how we can showcase the Confederation line in terms of a destination and some venue for tourists and residents of Ottawa.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question. You mentioned the Lansdowne or the Red Blacks model. So I was a little surprised when I looked at the special events that it's not encompassed in there. So I'm assuming when we build it into the price of the ticket for the concert or the game, we don't call that sponsorship. We call that something else.
Correct.
And so that's your intent. That's your preferred model, rather than going out to a local retailer or a developer or something. Going forward for 2017, it's to work with the organizers of the events and to suggest to them that if the ticket for the event is going to be $25, add another $3 or $4 or whatever to cover the cost of transportation. That's the preferred, or that's where the discussions are going?
That's where the discussions are going. We'll certainly entertain sponsorship. We've gone out multiple times for sponsorship of large-scale events like Canada Day and New Year's Eve and so forth, and the uptake is not that significant. So we'll take both, but we believe, based on some of the preliminary events that we've heard about, to add an extra, $3 or $4 to a ticket price, and you get transportation there and back. Based on you saw the numbers for the Red Blacks, people certainly enjoyed that experience, so we want to be part of that.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Aguilai. Commissioner Crew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Cloutier has already covered off some of the things that I wanted to talk about. With regard to the mechanical failure rate, a snapshot in time is one thing, but it's the trend that I'm always looking at. And I've seen that dramatic decrease from 2010 to 2014 in the number of mechanical failures. I take it that's a direct result of the age of our fleet, and this is really the return on our investment for having invested in such a young bus fleet.
Yes, but what I want to point out is that Mr. Charter, Mr. Greer, and their team have done a phenomenal job of getting staff, the mechanics, the attendants, everyone that touches those vehicles focused on the importance of that algorithm that I always talk about, how everything's interlined to get that service out on the street. You could have the youngest fleet, but if they're not doing the preventative maintenance, they're not focusing on the right things along that process. So yes, young fleet is good, staff doing phenomenal work, and the supervisors and the superintendents all working together.
Thank you for that. I certainly think it's important to mention that factor as well. And noticing that, 12.7 of those 24.8 for 2014 were ones that had no interruption in service. So I take it that those are those relatively minor issues of the type that you mentioned, of which the customers may not even be aware. However, that it's as part of the safety culture to capture every event that could be regarded as a mechanical failure to make sure that we respond.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Those types of situations are ones in which we've either been able to secure an alternate bus or resource to be able to complete a trip, or we have a team of mobile mechanics that can meet a bus at the end of a trip and make that quick minor repair and get that bus back in service. So that is correct.
Okay, I'm glad to see that trend, certainly, and the commitment to it. And then the other thing, very briefly, is on the fare enforcement. I know that the numbers are somewhat elusive out there, and that 4.1 seems very high. I'm also aware of some studies that suggest that if we're close to 4.1 and only 4.1, that we're doing very well, certainly compared to some of our APTA peers, particularly in the U.S. On that note, though, is what I hear you saying is that the apparent increase from approximately 3.5% in 2010 to 4.1 overall in 2014 could simply be a reflection of our increased commitment to those fare enforcement blitzes.
Mr. Chair, that is correct.
And I take it from Mr. Manconi's comment that we have no way of knowing what the actual rate of fare avoidance out there is, just the rate we detect.
That's correct.
Okay, and then with regard to the the issue of warnings, it was mentioned that we do take down the names of people that we give warnings to. I see there are two categories of warnings. They can be given a written warning or merely a verbal warning. Are we capturing the names of people that we provide even verbal warnings to, or is it only in the event that someone's given a written warning that we would know if we encounter that individual again?
Mr. Chair, the fare enforcement officers would be recording in their notes all that information. So the written warning is a more formal document in which they would issue to a person, but the verbal warnings they're keeping in their own notes and they're sharing amongst themselves.
Okay, and I take it they have a regular process for doing that.
That is correct.
Okay. Finally, I've got no difficulty with the 2.2% noted as being given verbal warnings, given that the direction from this commission at the time that we moved into full-scale implementation of the Presto card was to go easy on people at first and was to allow a transition time to for people to become fully familiar with all the aspects of the Presto card. I take it that as things go forward, that number may drop once we get out of the Presto transitional phase.
Yes, it may drop. The other thing that's going to cause it to drop is your new fare management system that you approved for the Trillium line and for Confederation line. We're going to go to a gated system, so it'll be very difficult to fare evade with those ones, and down the road, way down the road, we may look at rear boarding elimination, but that's when we can get into stage 2 and so forth. So yes, we'll probably see some of those numbers come down.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Crew. Commissioner Mallow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess it's the second time now, our second commission meeting, where we've heard that OC Transport staff are working on a new performance management framework. And that's encouraging. I guess I'd like to know a little bit more about that. What process? Well, first of all, is this sanctioned by the Commission? What process does OC Transport intend to follow? Will there be consultation? Do we have an idea of what the schedule might look like? Establishing what needs to be measured is as important as establishing what the standard should be. And I know that we don't have a standard here. We just have measurements. So I think this is fundamental work for the Commission and for OC Transport to do over the next however long it takes. but it's very important. So I'm just curious to see if we can get a little bit more detail.
Yes, certainly. The plan, in terms of timeline, it's Q3, Q4 of this year. We want to work with every member of the Commission, so Mr. Scrimger is putting together a draft based on the industry, and then he will be sitting down with each of you to get your thoughts on that. The discussion we want to have, both one-on-one and in the Commission, is the outward-facing. We want to move to more regular reporting to the public, so we can think of the top 10, top 12 that such as the speaker or other people have in terms of views, and those we can pick. But the discussion we want to have with this Commission is, when you talk about performance measurement and reporting, you want to have data that helps you push and pull levers. That's the discussion we want to have. These are all, this is great stuff here that we're talking about here today, but how are we driving the organization? How are we changing the culture? What are we chasing in terms of bottom line? What's the direct correlation to these numbers, to things that you, as the Commission, want to have in terms of discussion with staff? How does it tie into the corporate priorities plan and so forth, that clear line of sight? So Mr. Scrimger's got a bit of a straw dog mapped out. He'll bring what we've seen from the industry. We want to hear from you as members of the Commission, and then have a good discussion when we table that report. We will not be coming to you with this, here it is, and take it. We want it to be a discussion in terms of what you see, so there's no surprises when it comes to Commission in terms of, does it have that clear line of sight and reporting. I'm a big fan, and hopefully everybody agrees, of we should be doing reporting monthly on our website. That's what places like TTC has done. Are their measures perfect? No, but they're there, and the public can see them, and you're being open and transparent in terms of areas that you're performing well and areas that you want to improve on. But from a governance perspective, hopefully you will want to have clear line of sight of a number of measures that help you shape dialogue with staff. And I will finish with this. Let's not have 100 measures. That's a classic mistake. Everybody wants to measure everything, and then you end up not focusing on anything. You're just data-rich, information-poor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perfect.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mallow. Commissioner Milner.
Thank you. I'll keep this very quick. Just on the fair enforcement, we'll keep going back to this, I guess. A question about the provincial offenses. Does OC Transpo receive the revenue from that? Does the City of Ottawa receive the revenue from that? And do we have control over the amount of those?
Mr. Chair, the amount is set out in the bylaw, the transportation, in our bylaw. And the amount goes to the city courts. It's not. It doesn't go directly to OC Transpo.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Milner. I have no other speakers. Last chance for everyone. Seeing no speakers, is the performance report received? Received. Thank you very much. The next item is Transit Services Paratransport OC Service Standards Review. We do have one delegation from the public. Ms. Judy Bernstein. Judy, are you here? You wouldn't mind coming forward to make your presentation? You'll have 5 minutes to present to the Commission. At your leisure, there's a button on your microphone. Once it goes red, you're good to go.
Okay, actually I probably won't even take 5 minutes. So my name is Judy Bernstein, and I work for the Ottawa Carleton Association for Persons with Developmental Disabilities. I'm just here to say that people with developmental disabilities have been for many years asking for the eligibility criteria to be reviewed. So on behalf of people with developmental disabilities, I am here to voice their support that this review does proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Wonderful. That was very easy. Are there any questions for Ms. Bernstein? Seeing none. Are there any questions relating to the report? Councillor Wilkinson?
Yes, Mr. Chair, you know, I've raised items on paratransport many, many times, and the Ottawa Life Skills people actually are in my area as well, and I've been met with them, and I'm aware of many of the needs of it. So I was rather surprised of the people who are being appointed to this committee. I don't remember being asked, unless I missed it, because I would have liked to have been on that committee. I have a lot of people talk to me all the time about paratransport, and one of the things about the aging population, and I'm the oldest one here, and may need it sooner than anybody else on this particular commission. So I'm just wondering why, or whether we can add another person, because I would be very interested. I have a lot of connection with the people who use para. They do come to me frequently, not just from my ward, but from across the city, and have been interested in fact, pushing to get these kinds of changes made for para for some years now.
Yeah, that was my decision, Councillor. There's some other such working groups that we anticipate coming forward later in the year, and I thought you might be more interested in one of those and wanted to ensure the workload was spread properly. But if the Commission is agreeable, we can add Councillor Wilkinson to the recommendation for this working group.
I think this is an important one for para users.
Perfectly fair.
Okay.
I'm seeing.
And in addition to that, I wanted to say I'm glad to see this here and that this review is going to take place, because of doing it before we get into a crisis in operation of the system was very helpful, because certainly we can all see the aging population and the need. In fact, the numbers we just saw in the last report shows the increases that are happening regularly in paratransport use. And we know it's an expensive service. We have to be able to do it right.
Excellent. So can I just have someone who will add the amendment? Commissioner Crew, the amendment to add Councillor Wilkinson to the working group. Are there any other questions on the report? Seeing none, is the amendment approved? Carried? And the report as amended? Carried? Perfect. Thank you very much. There are no in-camera items. Any notices of motion? Okay, so we have inquiries. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has to do with the transitway from Bayshore to Moody Drive. I don't know if you realize this morning there was an accident on the 417 and people took up to an extra hour to come in because the buses were stopped dead. And this is because we have no this is the transitway traffic I'm talking about, not that runs on regular streets. They have to use and having the piece from Bayshore to Moody done would make that's the biggest difference that would improve things. There are bus only lanes until Moody, but from Moody to get to Bayshore, it's to go out to Canada some morning and try to come in that way, or Stittsville or any place, and you'll see what I mean. And this isn't on a snow day. So what the question is that because of that, I'd like to know, and the funding for doing this, by the way, was approved several years ago. So this is not something we're asking for funding. It's in the process now, but I haven't seen any action yet. And I'd like to know what the commencement is, the timeline for having it built, and what can be done to expedite its completion, because with what's going on in the rest of the system, I think that's going to be even more of a problem.
Can I just confirm you're interested in the timing of the construction of the transitway?
This is the timeline for completing the section of transitway from Bayshore to Moody, and what's being done to expedite the completion. I know it's not done directly by OC Transport, but OC Transport has an interest in it, and I think could have a good say in that.
Well, certainly I would agree we have an interest in it, but as you know, capital projects such as that are under the mandate of the Transportation Committee and flow through ISD. So I think I'm looking to the clerk. We can receive the inquiry and forward it to that committee.
I'd be quite happy if staff would redirect it in that direction, wherever we can get the answer, because I did ask this at the budget time, was told they'd try to speed it up, but I have no idea what's happening.
To Taffy, we can forward this on to Transportation?
Yes, Mr. Chair, this is properly under Transportation Committee.
Wonderful. So we'll take the inquiry and forward it on to Transportation Committee. Councillor. Commissioner Milner has some inquiries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two inquiries. One, considering the Transit Commission has not modified the ratio of cash rise to the cost of a monthly pass in a number of years, and considering that there's no longer a convenience incentive to purchase a monthly pass, what impact on ridership, revenue, and overall operations would decreasing the ratio of cash rise to monthly pass have? And second, are there any technological limitations that would limit OC Transpo from offering a, quote, rollback credit to unused monthly pass users for Presto cards where the user who may have received a financial incentive by using ePurse cash fare over a monthly pass. Further, would such an incentive, a time-limited incentive, have an impact on operational capacity of OC Transpo as ability to provide on-time, safe, and consistent service? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Milner. Any other increase? Seeing none, for adjournment, carried. Thank you very much, everyone.